Welcome back to Oh and Another Thing, your favorite news and politics podcast, your favorite news and politics YouTube podcast. I don't know, we haven't been doing the video link for YouTube lately. Maybe we'll go back to it. I don't know, but we're still on YouTube, so if you want to check us out there, just search for Oh and Another Thing on YouTube. You know where to find us. If you are tuned in on YouTube now, just listening to the audio stream over there, go over to Spotify, give us a subscribe over there. That way you never miss an episode of Oh and Another Thing on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anywhere else you get your podcasts. If you are on Spotify or any of the other streaming services, podcasting services, whatever, what do you call them? Podcast services, podcast streaming services, podcast platforms? I don't know anymore. Everything has a different name than it used to. So wherever you get your podcasts, go from there over to YouTube. Subscribe to us on YouTube so that way I have a reason to start doing the videos again. All right. Diving on in now, we have a lot to talk about this week. Obviously, on Monday, because we've only been doing this once a week now for the past couple weeks since I've returned to being a worker. Shout out to all of my comrades back in the field. So on Monday, it was Monday, right? Or was that Tuesday that we got the VP? That was Tuesday, because my sister asked me if I was going to do a Tuesday podcast now, and it was already like 6:30, and I was not going to do a podcast at 6:30 p.m. at night. I'll probably only do that on, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but on election night. Maybe we'll do a late pod. We'll probably be obligated to do a late pod by then because of the fame will accrue over the next few months, and people will be expecting one, but we'll probably end up doing a late night election podcast because we've done late night podcasts before. I shouldn't say it's never happened with Own Another Thing. We did it for the primaries, for the debate recap. So I shouldn't say we won't have to do a late night debate recap because obviously we'll have an October debate that will hopefully be very exciting for us to recap with Kamala Harris. What'd I say?
Kamala.
That's
you gotta start saying her name right. Kamala.
I thought it was Kamala.
You said Kamala. It's about the pronunciation.
Oh, I just don't say anything right.
It's about the pronunciation. I know everyone's been calling her.
That's how I say
Kamala.
comma. That's how I say comma. I know the pronunciation is COMMA dash la. I know. But the way I say.
How do you think her name is spelled?
No, that's the pronunciation of it. Whenever they do the phonetic pronunciation.
Kamala.
Yeah, she tweeted it, comma, like the word comma. But when I say it, it just says comma. It's just.
Kamala.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know what it is.
Not Kamala. Kamala.
Kamala.
There you go.
Yeah.
You got it.
Oh, because I've been dropping the second A by accident.
You've been saying Kamala.
Kamala.
You've been hitting that A real hard.
Hitting the A too hard. Okay, well, sorry. Go back and sit down.
Someone whose name is constantly mispronounced. I will stand up for a Kamala.
Go sit down. Go sit down. Your host, Vince Patrone, Giovanna ribbed me. Burt Beans, our producer. Anyway, back for another week, so make sure I say it right. Kamala.
No.
See, I was saying it right before, but now I'm thinking about it. Kamala.
Yes.
Okay.
Kamala.
Okay, so now Kamala Harris is the VP, or the whatever, VP-elect, VP, she's
nominee.
VP nominee, thank you. See, you got me all screwed up now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Harassing me over there. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. You're fine. You're fine. You're fine. I thought I was saying it right. That's the problem. Is I was pretty convinced I was saying it right.
You're hitting the wrong consonant. So it's not Kamala. It's Kamala.
I think that might just be my regionalisms.
No. There's no regionalism when it comes to names. You have to say that.
See, that's the problem. Is that it always happens though with every letter. Anyway, Kamala. So Kamala is the VP nominee, which is very exciting because most people like Kamala. It turns out, okay, I didn't want to dive into this right now. I was going to save it for later in the podcast. But on Twitter, there's the real world and there is Twitter world. So, internal polling came out a couple weeks ago whenever the Veep stakes was still happening. Hot and heavy, if you will. Hot and heavy, if you will. That showed that Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, Susan Rice, and Gretchen, and what was that? No, Karen Bass didn't poll as well as the other. This is just with the polling. But Karen Bass was still like the top 5. But Kamala and Warren were number 1, number 2, if not tied, I think at 7% for favorability or 7% for like if they added to the ticket or whatever. But they polled positively at about the same rate and at the highest percentages with normal people. And that's obviously with normal people being the heavy hitter there, because I hate to say it to all of my friends on Twitter and to all of us on Twitter, we're warped by Twitter a little bit. So, what we think of Kamala Harris, may it be that we are going to call her a cop on Twitter all day long, or that we're going to speak specifically about her prosecution record, which needs talked about and deserves the scrutiny that it's given. Aside from us and the people on Twitter already saying they weren't going to vote and that adding Kamala Harris to the ticket makes them want to vote less, it doesn't matter. Because it's likely that you probably weren't going to go vote anyway, no matter who the Democratic nominee or whoever the Democratic VP pick was. And this is not to say that that is not your right, because if you're that disenfranchised with voting, I would understand why in a very important election that's very important to you, because you feel politically energized for the first time because of the climate we're all in, because we have liberal fascism taking hold in the country, that you would want something a little less fascist, a little less cop, a little less run-of-the-mill politician. I understand that. But there's a chance that if you were already saying that you weren't going to go vote for Joe Biden in an election that is incredibly important for the state of the country. We have the top down, saying by top down I mean windows open.
Sitting in our convertible.
But if you were saying that you weren't going to vote for Joe Biden, and what we have established and has been reestablished time and time again over the past 3 years is a very, very important election for the health of our, and I'm going to put it in air quotes here, democracy, because I know it's never worked truly that well for anybody. If we want to keep even a sliver of that so we can improve upon it into the future, if you were already saying that you weren't going to vote in this election, you probably weren't going to vote no matter who the VP pick was, and you were probably going to have a problem with whoever the VP pick was. I don't know who these people wanted the VP pick to be. I know a lot of people like Elizabeth Warren, but I know the same people that say they like Elizabeth Warren now were all over Twitter calling Elizabeth Warren a snake 6 months ago. So it's hard to get a good temperature of what Twitter wants, because on Twitter we really never know what we want, and it's a great place for us to have fun with our hot takes and live in a realm that is totally untethered from a reality outside of that realm, which might be a truer reality. We are more realistic on Twitter, I will say. It might be wild. We hold people more accountable. It's much... Boy, I don't know. Do you think Twitter is healthier than the actual reality of the world? What do you say? Okay, there we go. So Twitter is not a healthier place than the reality of the world. I don't know. Some people like it. I like it.
But it's not healthy.
You're right. It is not a healthy place. It's not healthy for reality.
It's
so
not a reflection of reality. It's a reflection of a...
Get in.
No, I love being on Twitter, but it's definitely a greater reflection of the 18 to 29 demographic for sure, which is great. We love it. And they hold people, like you're saying, Twitter holds people accountable, which is awesome. But also it is important, and I have to constantly remind myself this, that when you see all the outrage on Twitter and people saying that they're not going to vote, you, of course, have to, campaigns need to see that and say, okay, what can we do to get their vote? But we as voters shouldn't be like, well, all hope is lost. Nobody's voting now.
Because
I do that. I saw that she got, my Twitter was very split, but I saw that like so many people were upset, and I was like, oh my gosh. But then you brought up the very valid point that like, if they don't like Kamala, it's very unlikely that they liked Biden.
Yeah.
Like you don't love Biden and hate Kamala. That just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
People dislike them. And people who do dislike them for similar reasons.
Yeah.
So this didn't push anybody over the edge for not voting.
Yeah.
They weren't like, I was going to vote for Biden if it was Warren, but now that it's Kamala, I'm not going to. Like, I think that's probably a very small percentage of people. And I think that the campaign still should take that seriously and say, okay, what can we do to ease your worries?
Yeah.
What can we do to comfort you? And I know they were talking on, we were listening to Pod Save the other day. Or no, I was listening to What a Day, and they were talking about her prosecution record and how they talked with, like, some criminal justice people or some people who are pushing, some prison reform people. And they were talking about how they pushed her on that. And she says that if she could do it all over again, she would do things very differently. And I know, like, that only goes so far because it already happened and it already hurt a lot of people. But I do think that people should keep pushing her on that and keep pushing for her to admit that she's made mistakes and that she's going to do them right in the future.
Because that's the other thing of this is that Kamala Harris is not... She's been a different senator than she was attorney general and prosecutor. She's been... Well, I guess that's not entirely true, because if you go through her, she supported a lot of wartime measures, even during this administration. However, on other issues, she has proven to be one of the more progressive senators in the Senate, right along lines with Bernie Sanders' voting record. Obviously not as liberal as Bernie Sanders' voting record, but right up there with him. I think she's 2 or 3 up there, right there with Warren in terms of progressive policies, and her work with, the big thing everybody's been pointing to is her work whenever it came to prosecuting the banks in California, I believe it was. They were talking about how she stood up to the banks, and that's how her and Beau Biden ran into each other, and that's how the bond was formed, or some garbage like that, which shouldn't be as important, but her record as a senator, long story short, has been on the progressive side of things. So it's not that she's an unprogressive voice. She might not be, full on... She's not Bernie Sanders, is what it comes down to. She's not Bernie Sanders. She's not Angus King, even. She's not... I'm trying to think of anybody else.
People are rightfully upset just because of, like, the climate that we're in right now and how people have been protesting police brutality every single day. And she is someone who people said you can't put a lot of people have been saying you can't put the word prosecutor and progressive in the same sentence because it's hypocritical. You can't be a prosecutor and be progressive, which I don't know how much truth there is to that, but a lot of people feel that because she has that past, like, she could never truly be progressive. But I think the only thing that she can do is just be as progressive as possible. Yeah. Like, she needs to just distance herself as far away as she possibly can and use those prosecution skills that she's gained, because she's clearly a very good speaker. She's clearly a very good debater. I mean, she's incredible to watch.
Really good questioner.
Really good questioner. And, a lot of that comes from her prosecution record. So if she can use those things that she once used for evil to use them for good now, I think that's all she can do.
That's all good and fine. That's all good and fine. Yeah. I know it's not thrilling, and I know the joke on Twitter has been, and I don't want to keep dwelling on the Twitter world because it's clearly not as important as the real world, because as we said, people on Twitter also have a tendency to not vote anyway, which is stupid. I know everybody on Twitter likes to think that we know so much about what's going on and what the impact of the things we do and say is, and we think that our vote doesn't matter and all that stuff.
There's a lot of disenfranchised people.
And it's a lot of disenfranchised people coming together to be disenfranchised together, which is fine and dandy. It's a good time.
Yeah.
But again, not us, because I was going to vote anyway, and there's a lot of people on Twitter who are going to vote anyway, and we're planning to vote. So this is not to even everybody on Twitter, but there is that super small, I don't want to call it a majority of people, because it's not. It's a super small group of people on Twitter that get boosted a ton. I don't know how we see... I think you and I see more similar tweets. We have very different Twitters, but when our Twitters come together... we see a lot of the same people saying that they're not going to vote. It's always like the same accounts. Yeah. I feel like.
I think a lot of people vote on principle, which I think is very fair. So I know a lot of people already were not going to vote because of Joe Biden's sexual assault accusations towards him for sexual assault. A lot of people said on principle, I cannot vote for that because of this, that, or the other thing. Maybe they've had something in the past happen to them. And I think it's very hard to convince somebody like that because, that's very difficult. But with Kamala, it's like, it's happened in the past and it's terrible. And I think a lot of people have been saying you can still hold somebody accountable and rightfully criticize them and push them on it and question them on it and still vote for them, you know?
Yeah. Especially in this situation. If we had a better choice, we'd make the better choice. But
of course.
This is the choice we've been presented with. So we just kind of have to take it, because we have to remember then that even though we're not necessarily Elizabeth Warren in love with Kamala Harris, we're not exactly Elizabeth Warren in love with Joe Biden, as we were with Elizabeth Warren in this House. They're still 60 times better, at least, than what we have now.
Your sister, Gianna, hi Gianna, posted something the other day I thought was really good that said that voting is a journey. It's not a destination. So we have to vote with what gets us closest to where we want to go. If we vote for Trump or don't vote at all, you're not moving us forward at all. If you vote for Biden, you're at least moving us forward a little bit. And
at least
even
out
though
of this chapter.
We're at least out of this chapter. We're trying to get to Dallas, and Biden might get us to Houston, and we can hitchhike the rest of the way. Right?
I don't know. I've never been to Texas. I don't know how that works. I don't know what you're talking about.
They're just saying, like, this voting for them will get us closer to where we need to be. It's not going to get us to our final destination. Bernie would have got us a lot closer. Warren would have got us a lot closer where we need to be as a country. But Biden will get us a lot closer than Trump, and Biden can help to undo a lot of the terrible things that he has already done.
Yes.
You know, and a lot of people who say they are not going to vote are coming from a place of privilege of being able to not suffer the consequences of not voting, you know?
Or haven't fully suffered the consequences.
And especially right now, in the middle of a pandemic, most of us are not in a position of privilege to not be able to vote. Like, that's what the thing is. Normally, there's a lot more people in a place of privilege, but with unemployment as high as it is, like, they're right here with us.
They're right here with us.
With unemployment as high as it is, I feel like the majority of the country is not in a position of privilege where they can't vote right now. We have to vote so that stuff happens, and we have to vote for the people that can't vote. And I understand, like, people get frustrated when you just say, go vote, and, you know, a lot of rich celebrities are like, everybody go vote, not realizing that, like, I think it's something like 13% of the country, or 13%, I'm not going to guess on stats here, but a large portion of black and brown people in the United States cannot vote for one reason or the other, for different voter suppression tactics, whether or not they've had a prison record, or whether or not they live in a state that requires multiple forms of ID. It's just, there's so much voter suppression that I understand that people just shouting vote, vote, vote can be very, like, disenfranchising. But I think if you do have the ability to vote and you can vote, you have to use that power to vote for people that cannot, you know? So, I don't know. Sorry if I took you off track.
No, that did take me off track. You're good. Are you going to hang around? Are you going to hang around on the couch? You moving? You going back to editing?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what we were saying, not the worst choice, a good choice, progressive enough. We like her. Most people will like her. It's a good choice by Joe Biden. It's better than he could have. We have to remember that Gretchen Whitmer is, like, tailor-made to have been the wrong choice for this. As much as we love Gretchen Whitmer as governor of Michigan, that she stood up to what do you call them, conservatives, and am I saying it's Wisconsin, right? She's the governor of Wisconsin, not Michigan. Jesus Christ.
You just said
I know, I just said it. Anyway, governor of Michigan, get me the hell out of here. So she's governor of Michigan. She's done a good enough job there. She stood up to conservatives in Michigan. We like her as that, but you know what would have been a terrible idea? Putting Gretchen Whitmer on the ticket at this time. That would have been the Tim Kaine of choices, because Tim Kaine was just another white dude. And unfortunately, Gretchen Whitmer also would have just been another white politician lady. And I think that is where her issues lie. Also that she has no national recognition. We only know her because for a couple of weeks she was the headlines about coronavirus, because she stood up and she mandated masks in Michigan whenever people didn't want it. That's the only reason we know of her. And that's fine. That's a good reason to know of her. But again, you have more of a record, more of a national profile with Kamala Harris, which is the problem that you had with, whatchamacallit, Sarah Palin. Sarah Palin had 2 weeks where she really made a difference on the Republican ticket. There were about 2 weeks in 2008 where Sarah Palin was announced and it felt like, oh wow, that's a good choice. But then the vetting started. Then coverage went to Alaska. Then we found out more about Sarah Palin, and Sarah Palin started talking more, and we heard things from Sarah Palin that nobody had heard before because Sarah Palin hadn't had a microphone essentially before. Yes, she was governor of Alaska, but we didn't hear much from the governor of Alaska back then. We didn't hear a ton about her back then. Then suddenly, she had all this attention. Suddenly, she was in the spotlight. Suddenly, everything she said, goofy most of the time or otherwise, was under scrutiny. With Kamala Harris, you don't have that. With Gretchen Whitmer, you may have had that. With Karen Bass, you'd have had that. As much as Karen Bass would have been a really good progressive choice, Karen Bass also, and I hate to have to talk about the negatives of people, but that's what happens in the political world and happens on the online world that we're also decrying on this episode. Karen Bass gave a speech to a bunch of Scientologists. Do you think that was going to play well down the road with evangelicals? That was that's like what popped up whenever, okay, wow, we have to rewind a couple weeks because we don't get to talk about everything on the pod, but we have a lot to talk about today, so we might as well talk about all of it as comprehensively as possible. A couple of weeks ago, there was a story going on where the Vice President Selection Committee had leaked criticisms. You remember that they leaked criticisms of Kamala Harris, saying she was someone who was going to try to get ahead the whole time, that she wasn't going to be the vice president, she was be like constantly campaigning to be the next president, and garbage like that. Ed Rendell, shout out to that old bag of wind from Pennsylvania, kind of leading the charge on that. But one of the things that also came out during that oppo dump, if you will, from whoever was doing it, there was a clip of Karen Bass giving a speech to a bunch of Scientologists from like 6 years ago. Yeah, it was just like a weird thing. It's just like a weird enough thing that if that had come out, that could have been like, oh wow, she supported the bridge to nowhere, like what Sarah Palin supported. You know, just like something like that. Just a goofy little story that shouldn't have been a big story. Well, I guess that was a pretty big policy failure on Sarah Palin's part and wasted a ton of taxpayer money. So yeah, okay, totally different in that regard, but just one of those things that you have to watch out for that you know can get picked up and shredded through the Fox News ecosystem, which is something you have to really worry about. And that's also why I think Susan Rice didn't get the nomination, because Susan Rice would have been a great option if people cared about foreign policy. That's the thing people keep forgetting whenever they talk about how Susan Rice would have been a great pick. The average voter who is less politically inclined and cares more about domestic issue, which the average voter does, than international issues, which is more of a something people that pay closer attention to politics care about when they vote, is what's going on internationally and what happens internationally. I know there's always the hot ticket ones like Russia and China, but then you have to think about Czechoslovakia and all your other places, but it's not as big a deal to other people. So putting Susan Rice on the ticket wouldn't have been a big win domestically and would have probably been more of a hindrance because of the negative press you're going to get because of her relation to Benghazi, which we know doesn't matter because Benghazi was a fake controversy and a fake story and not a hoax. What happened in Benghazi, but it wasn't the story that it was made into. And in fact, Ron Johnson, who was the Republican senator who practically led the charge on it, even said that it was just a politically motivated thing to help Trump win the election in 2016. And he's also trying to do it again with the investigation into the Russia investigation. A lot to keep up with there. So we have still a crazy few months ahead of us, but this week has been a nice shot of hope and optimism, I would say, because I overall feel well and good about the Harris choice. I know you feel all well and good about the Harris choice. I know people like my mother feel all well and good about the Harris choice. And I know my sister feels all well and good about the Harris choice. I'm trying to think if do I know anybody else? I haven't polled my coworkers yet on the Harris choice. Usually I poll my coworkers on these matters. I haven't had a chance to do it yet, but so far the overwhelming response has been positive to Kamala Harris, aside again from some of the people on Twitter. So I feel good about it, and I think we should all just take a minute to feel good about it. Okay, because the next few months are going to be absolutely awful, as we've already seen, because Trump's campaign, literally a day and a half into this, has already started playing the bad faith birther card with Kamala Harris, which is such garbage because, as we know, Kamala Harris's parents are immigrants. Her mother was an immigrant. Her dad an immigrant? No?
She said her parents came from opposite sides of the world. They came from India and Jamaica, so they must both be...
Oh, okay, yeah, so they are both immigrants. Okay, cool. So, immigrant parents. The argument now is being made that even though she was born in California, she's not eligible to be on the ticket because of her parents being immigrants, which is not true, as we know. As long as you're born here, you can be born here or on any Air Force base or any island that is a U.S. territory. You do not have to have been born in Tennessee, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, California, Arkansas, Texas. Boy, I cannot name states when I put myself under the up to the challenge on air of. Did I say Minnesota? Montana? South Dakota? North Carolina, South Carolina. Virginia, West Virginia. Utah, Wyoming. Washington. Colorado, Connecticut, D.C. Maybe someday. Worth noting that in that song, I don't know if you guys heard Giovanna singing. I don't know if you guys heard Giovanna singing her state song there. There was an absolute opportunity for them to try to rhyme Michigan by saying Michigan, and they didn't take it, which is really, really well done because that's cheap songwriting when artists do that, I want to say.
You mean your elementary school didn't make you memorize a 50 States song?
My elementary school had me memorize the 10 Commandments.
Oh. This is where Massachusetts and Pennsylvania differ.
We didn't get to play Oregon Trail, though, which was very nice, but I also had to memorize the 10 Commandments.
Did you get to play Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego?
No, but I did that at home. Oh. My parents provided Carmen Sandiego. That was not school appointed.
Supplementary.
Yeah, that was supplementary education. Yeah, absolutely. My non-secular education. Or my secular education. Anyway, so we're happy enough with the VP choice. I think we can move on from it, even though we know Republicans are going to do a lot of bad faith attacks, like what they did against Barack Obama already, because, as we know, Kamala Harris is a person of color. She is somebody who is not white. She is not... I really enjoyed that they kept calling Tucker Carlson the other day, which I'm going to probably pick up now and adopt, but she's not... She's not a whitey. Laugh my butt off. So obviously Fox News is going to have to attack her as if she's some outsider who don't belong here, whenever we know that is not true, and that all people, and whenever all people are welcome in our political system, it reflects who America is better and is better for our democracy, because we get a better picture of what America is and what America wants when all are welcome to participate, no matter who they are, where they come from, what they look like, and all of that. And that's why it's so exciting that Ilhan Omar this week trounced her primary opponent. Ilhan Omar, Somali refugee who has worked her way into being in the United States House of Representatives, is a favorite target of the president, is a favorite target of Fox News because of who she is, because of where she comes from. And it's encouraging to see that she, and because of her progressive views, her incredibly progressive views, probably... Well, her, AOC, Rashida Tlaib, and I miss someone more. I always forget the fourth, Ayanna Pressley, who we love. Who you love.
Do I love?
Ayanna Pressley.
I love Ayanna.
You love Ayanna Pressley. Who do I love? That reminded me of yesterday. I played that clip. I had that clip on repeat when I was taking a shower yesterday, which is weird, of the president being asked by that reporter about all of his lies. And the president goes, "Who did all the lying?" And he goes, "You." It's so dumb, but it's real, so that's fine, I guess. But anyway, we'll have to put up with a lot of bad faith attacks. It's not going to be a clean election. It's going to be very sloppy, very dirty, but hopefully we can prevail, and I think we have the ticket to do it. Now we just have to organize and keep the boots on the ground and on the phones. Keep your boots on the ground. Hey, everything will work out. And you get on the telephone and you send your text messages. And maybe you send an email forward to your parents that say if they don't share it with 10 friends, their daughter will be kidnapped or something. Woo! Get your email threads going. I'll never forget the email thread. I'll never forget it. But that's maybe that's a tool we need to start utilizing on the left more. Maybe our problem is that we're not doing chainmail enough. Anyway, moving on now to the gross stuff of the week. Trump's opposition to additional funding for the U.S. Postal Service puts at risk the nation's ability to administer November 3rd election. That is from the Washington Post. That is their headline, and that is followed by New Jersey saying that they're going to send mail-in ballots to every voter. This comes a day after Pennsylvania has been warned by the USPS that due to the president's personal cuts of funding, the president himself has gone out of his way to make it harder for the mail to happen. He has done this on a calculated effort to ruin the chance of him being taken out of office via vote by mail, a totally legal, legitimate form of voting that has been done by college students, people serving in the military, presidents, golf enthusiasts that own properties and manage casinos into the ground for centuries, and has been used by those people for, I shouldn't say centuries, because I guess centuries makes it sound like it's been like 300 years, but for long enough, for at least 50 years. So vote by mail and mail-in voting, all of it, it's all the same. Absentee voting, vote by mail, it's all the same, because all an absentee vote is, and maybe we should break it down here. An absentee vote is just a mail-in vote. An absentee vote is a vote you cast because you, for some reason, cannot go to the polls in your local area or your specific polling site on the day of your election, be it that you are overseas, be it that you are just away on a vacation, be it that you are away at university, studying your scholastics, whatever it may be. You are eligible, or be it that you are sick, have a disability, any reason at all. You can get, I guess not any reason, but any of those reasons, you can get yourself an absentee ballot. States like New York this year made an exception, saying that because of coronavirus, there's legitimate belief and legitimate reason to fear for your safety going to the polls, thus qualifying it as, I believe they said that you had fear of coronavirus, so they considered it a sick thing or a disability situation where you were just not able to go to the polls because of external circumstances, which is how it should be everywhere, because as we have been shown, if it's not safe to, do a lot of things, it shouldn't really be safe for us to go vote in person. And that's one of the president's arguments, is that, it's not safe to, or it's safe enough to open schools, but it might not be safe enough. It's not safe enough to open schools, but it might be safe enough to vote in person. But anyway, there's so many counterintuitive arguments to all of this, whenever it should just be, it's not safe enough to do anything right now, so let's just not do anything and just live from home, because it worked for 4 months, why can't we just keep doing it? But anyway, so New Jersey's going to send in more mail ballots they're going to mail ballots to every voter, which is really good news, because New Jersey can then have their full population vote in an easy at-home setting where they can educate themselves while they're voting on their chosen votes. On the same day that the president went on Fox News, and let me pull up the quote here, said on Fox and Friends, his favorite morning show, that they, the Democrats and the U.S. Postal Service, want $25 billion for the post office. Now, they need that money in order to have the post office work, so it can take all of these millions and millions of ballots. Now, in the meantime, they aren't getting there. By the way, those are just 2 items. But if they don't get those 2 items, that means you can't have universal mail-in voting, because they're not equipped. So when he says they're not equipped, he means he's been taking out their capacity to have vote by mail. It requires a lot of mail to go out. Where, again, he's right. We're talking millions and millions of ballots. We are talking a lot of mail. So he's taking out sorting machines that say where the mail's supposed to go. He's slowing down the mail. He's not just slowing down the mail to hurt people voting. That's why he's doing it, but he forgets that he's also hurting people's ability to get prescriptions, hurting people's ability to get their bills. The prescriptions is the most heinous one, because I remember my dad used to get this prescription, or he got it one time, and I don't know if I'm actually allowed to talk about this, because now that I'm saying it seems kind of shady. He got one pill sent in the mail one time. He got one pill sent in from India, I believe it was. It was very cool packaging. It had a very cool stamp on it. But it came in the mail, and I believe that if he had it sent in, my dad, a reigning pharmacist from Pennsylvania, would know if he needed it and needed to get it by mail. So he did. I know there's a lot of seniors and people who don't leave their home, people immunocompromised, people who get their prescriptions delivered that are just regular prescriptions that get sent in the mail.
A lot of times with prescriptions, too, my college roommate used to get her prescription. She had like a 60-day prescription that would get filled. And because the way her insurance was set, and it was something she needed, it was for her liver. And because of the way it was set up, she could only get it like right before she ran out. So if the mail got delayed, if there was an issue with the mail, she might reach a point where she can't take that medicine, which for a lot of people, they can't take a few days off from the medicine. Yeah. A lot of medication doesn't work if you don't take it every day. And because of how shitty insurance is, sorry, Sue, because of how bad insurance is.
We're still cussing, Ma. We're going to keep cussing on the pod.
But because of the way, because insurance is bad, a lot of people can't get their prescriptions until right before it runs out. So if you slow down the mail, a lot of people are going to have to miss days, which is not good. Okay.
All right. So thank you. It's nice been having you on more lately. You have a lot to say. She has lots to say. Has plenty to say and will say it. Anyway, so the president's attack on the post office just gets more heinous as the days go along. Because first it was cuts to funding. Then we started hearing about the mail slowing down. Then we heard about him installing this DeJoy fella, Louis DeJoy, which pretty good name. I gotta say, that's not a bad name. It sounds French. I'm probably adding more flair to it than it really is. It's probably like, Louis DeJoy, you mean? But he's, I can't remember if he had big shares of FedEx or UPS or one of the private companies, maybe Amazon. There's a whole conflict of interest with him being in charge of the post office right now, being the newly installed postmaster general. But the big thing is that he was one of Trump's largest campaign donors. Gave Trump millions and millions of dollars to his campaign and to his, whatchamacallit. I can't think about it, but he gave him a lot of money to Trump's campaign, so there's another conflict of interest there, but everybody gives money to everybody, so he can't say that's too big a conflict of interest anymore. But he's in charge of the post office, and since he's taken over, he's been making it harder for mail folks to do their job, to get mail out on time. We saw one testimony from a mail folk who was a carrier. Was the testimonial you got from Massachusetts, is that where that mail carrier was from? I forget. But we saw that the person had been delivering like thousands of pieces of mail, and they were only delivering like 400 pieces of mail the next day. Yeah. And it's stuff like that is slowing down probably my bicycle from getting here. Shout out to FedEx. Get me my goddamn bike. I want to ride to work. But also, again, risking the lives of millions of people who get their prescriptions sent in via the mail. Risking the livelihoods of people that are waiting for checks in the mail, waiting for bills in the mail so they can see where they stand financially. Payments, this, that, other things. There's so much that the USPS and mail does, and does for us in a setting that, yes, makes no money for the government, makes no money for them. But that's what it's supposed to do. It's a service to you and I and to the other citizens that you know. So use it and appreciate it before they take it away and ruin it even more. So that way they can keep a fascist in office. Because we have to start saying it as it is. Trump is a fascist. He is using right-wing conspiracy. He is using right-wing ideological thinking. He is using corporations. He is currying the favor of billionaires. He is working to undermine our democratic institutions. Left-leaning institutions, moderate institutions, all governing institutions, in an attempt to weaponize the federal government for his own purpose to suppress people that disagree with him. This is fascism. You are living through fascism. The President of the United States is working tirelessly not to stop coronavirus from killing hundreds of thousands of people, infecting millions of people in his own country, within his own domain and his own jurisdiction. He's not working tirelessly to save the economy. That is, though the economy had its best month since February in terms of retail sales, is showing signs of slowing because there is no longer money going into people's homes because he passed some bogus referendums last week that don't do anything. Memorandums that don't do anything. We keep misclassifying them as executive orders when executive orders require action and memorandums are more of just suggestions. And do not forget the suggestion that the president made at his golf course in New Jersey last week did not ensure that the unemployment benefit would be extended. As you have seen, it has not been extended. All it did was require that states themselves extend the unemployment benefit. If you read the fine print of the president's memorandum that he put out last week, one of the three he put out, again from his New Jersey golf course, one on the unemployment insurance extension. The extension says that the government will provide $400 of extended unemployment benefits. This is not direct quotes from the document. However, it requires that states provide 25% of that $400. That is equal to $100 US for those of you doing the math at home. So, out of the 400 United States dollars, 100 of the United States dollars have to be provided by the states. However, states can't afford to continue providing that extra $100 to their people on unemployment because Republican senators yesterday adjourned after the House adjourned last week without passing a meaningful stimulus that sends extra money from the federal government to states to support such a stipulation in an unemployment extension. Now, since states cannot afford to provide that extra $100 on top of people's unemployment benefit, the federal government therefore does not have to enter into an agreement with those states to provide the extra $300 of support. The $400 is incumbent on $100 to get the other $300. A typical Trump deal. You do this, I do this. Another quid quo pro. However, it's semi-legal because it has to do with the states and all this other shit, so it's fine. But this doesn't do anything except win him 2 days of good headlines and false credit from the media who need to get better at covering this shit because it's ridiculous that he got away with that and got away with passing a memorandum on evictions that says it's up to states to not do evictions. He's not doing anything but passing responsibility onto the states so that way he can't get blamed, but that doesn't pull well with people, so that's fine. He's costing himself the election. An election he is again trying to steal again by ruining one of the only government institutions, the only functioning pieces of government services that you get to use every day, that everybody gets to use every day, that is created only to benefit the people. It creates jobs for people that can't find jobs. It is a huge employer in the United States. Shout out to Uncle Pret who worked for the Postal Service for years. These are people's jobs. Woo! These are people's jobs that are at stake. This is the mail that is at stake. This is the election that is at stake. This is people's health that is at stake. The democracy is at stake. Everything has now come down to getting funding for the post office and getting funding for states to support their own people because the federal government do not want to do it because the people at the highest levels of the federal government know that by allowing people to have wider access to the things they need, they will lose in November. By the things they need, I mean vote by mail, the ability to use the postal service effectively to get their ballots and to participate in democracy. Voter suppression from the highest levels of government to keep hold of power over our country and over the country so they can continue to benefit And bottom line, continue to not go to jail. The president himself has been quoted saying that as long as he is president, he can't go to jail. The president wants to be president so he can get more money for his friends and not go to jail. That is the bottom line. He does not care about you. If he cared about you, he would have passed a meaningful executive order last week. If he cared about you, he would have passed a meaningful executive order about your mortgage, about your rent payments, about your risk of being evicted from your home suddenly because you can't pay the bills because of a pandemic that, though he did not cause the pandemic, he caused a shit response to the pandemic that now has our economy totally, completely fucked. We're in a place where unemployment is still the highest it's been since the Great Depression. We are at a place where spending is starting to slow again because people are not making the money they were before. Even with unemployment benefit, people are not making the money they were before now. It is a bad situation, and he has done nothing to get himself out of it. So instead of working to get himself out of it because it would require actual work, what has his campaign focused on doing? Stopping the mail. That way people can't get their ballots or request their ballots. And we found out this week, working to actively sabotage the election by propping up a third-party candidate, Kanye West. We found out this week that Jared Kushner, who went on TV and did not discredit the birtherism theories against Kamala Harris today by saying that, well, it's something that's out there. That's all he had the spine to say. Met with Kanye West at Kanye's ranch and wherever the fuck it is. Wyoming? Utah? Regardless, he met with Kanye at his ranch and talked about his election prospects and how he can better his election prospects. I cannot say enough how fucked up it is that, whatchamacallit, the special advisor to the president, Jared Kushner, went to Wyoming to help with the campaign of someone trying to mount a third-party run. Someone who is mounting a third-party run, as he himself, Kanye, has said, to siphon black votes away from Joe Biden. That is the only reason Republicans have put themselves behind Kanye West, and Kanye West has put himself on the ballot. We're not going to talk about it anymore because it is not. The more attention it gets, the worse it gets, and the more likely it gets that Kanye will scrap up a few votes here and there. I don't think he has an actual chance of stealing a meaningful amount of votes in this election. I think people are smart enough to understand that in this democracy, in this economy, in this democracy, a third-party candidate does not have an actual chance of winning an election. That's just how it is and how it's been since the beginning of time. It's not how it should be. I'm not saying it's how it should be. It's just how it is. So, all Kanye is doing is attempting, it's not even a good faith attempt at this point, to take away black votes from Joe Biden, which is incredibly cynical and something they think will be effective, and something that Republican operatives think, and we know Republican operatives have been involved in this because that's who's filing his paperwork. We have people working within the Republican Party to get Kanye on the ballot in states, because the whole goal, again, is a bad faith attack to siphon black voters from their Democratic Party, because they think that black voters are so dumb that they will just vote for any black guy they put on a ticket. That is what the Republican Party is saying via their puppet campaign with Kanye West. We think everyone is so stupid that they will just vote for Kanye because despite everything he has shown us, every crazy thing he has said, every just wildly untethered thought this man has had and broadcasted to all of us. I can't believe I'm saying that because I used to love Kanye, but he has gotten just so... He needs so much help. All I can do is hope that Kanye gets the help he needs. But that this person is going to be an honest-to-God good choice for president, so you should give him his vote. And they think that people are going to buy into that, particularly black people, because they think so little of black people. And it shows with this choice. And I know that is probably controversial and wild to say, but it's true. That is all it is, and Kanye's even said it himself. So for Kushner to go and meet up with him before, or this week, to get things together, to get on the same page, it's illegal for one, but we don't care about that, obviously, because Trump committed, 3 impeachable offenses this week. That's one of them. The post office thing is one of them, and I'm sure there's a third we can find. But they just don't care, and they're going to do anything they can to hold on to power in November. So you have to be aware of this, I guess, is all I'm trying to say. What else we got? We're just scrolling real quick. We talked about Jared Kushner. Oh, we talked about it all. Good pod this week. Oh, okay. So this is the thing we wanted to close on here. So despite the president saying he opposes giving funding to the post office, the House Minority Leader, Kevin McCarthy, is saying, the Republican Party, is saying that there is no need to fear because they'll pass something in the House that funds the post office. Which shows just how incredibly naive everybody is. Because if you think that Mitch McConnell is calling the Senate back from their little September recess they're going on here. By the way, the Senate said, we'll see you in September, like my coworker did. It's funny, I was leaving work yesterday, and one of my coworkers was seeing when we would work next, and it turns out that I won't work with them again until September. And she said, oh, well, I'll see you in September. Mitch McConnell said the same thing to all of us this week. Whenever they adjourn the Senate for the rest of August, for the next 2 weeks, without passing a stimulus, without passing funding for the post office, without doing anything. They came, they worked their 3 days a week, they hung out in the room, and they left. And now here we are. So, I guess all I'm saying is that clearly all we can hope is that the good weeks of the good vibes from this week with Kamala Harris being selected as the Democratic Party VP, all this hope and encouragement that we're feeling can be enough to ride us through the next 4 months of absolute trash from the Republican Party. And hopefully we can come together and just vote and get through all of this so we don't have to deal with it for another 4 years. Because if you think this is bad, wait till you see what America looks like in 2 years under another 4 years of Trump's presidency. We can get excited for Michael Cohen's book. I know Michael Cohen has a book coming out that he wrote in prison. He says it's the book Donald Trump doesn't want us to see. My favorite publishing cliche is, this is the book such and such doesn't want you to read. And Michael Cohen embraced it fully. So we have that to look forward to. And we have, hopefully, a new administration to look forward to. Because for the first time in probably 3 months, I am 100% hopeful that Democrats can do this thing and that America can do this so we can get Trump out of office now that we have the right ticket. Thank you for tuning in to Oh, and Another Thing. It was a good week. I think we covered everything. We talked about the bogus unemployment. We talked about, not the bogus unemployment, we talked about the bogus executive orders. We talked about the VP choice. We talked about Trump trying to sabotage the post office. We didn't talk about Mike Pence and his red meat, but that is okay because we don't need to talk about Mike Pence and his red meat. We're not going to let Joe Biden and Kamala Harris cut our meat. If this is the kind of stuff we have to look forward to from Republicans, maybe I'm wrong to be scared of how dark it's going to be over the next 4 months, because that was what they went with this week. So we'll see. We'll be back next Friday with more Oh, and Another Thing. Thank you for tuning in. If you want to see something ridiculous, Google Mike Pence red meat. See you next Friday. More Oh, and Another Thing then. Have a good weekend.
That should be your outro.